What's up, everybody? It's the back-to-back guard, the always whack guard, Gavin with a tall glass of Soylent Green to start the hour. What the fuck is up, everybody? We are back again. Like I said, 2 days in a row. Got a couple of spicy things to discuss here this afternoon. It's hot as fuck in Kansas City. Oh my God, it's over 100 fucking degrees here. Tried to take my dog for a walk. I made it like 100 yards, guys. Turned right around. Couldn't do it. But anyway, how you doing today, Gavin?
Doing good. Excited to be back on the mic. Excited to chat about some more juicy drama that's gone down since the last time we were live, which was yesterday. We had a great show yesterday, and we got a lot more to talk about today. So excited to go over that. Excited to engage with all the comrades in the chat. So thanks everyone for tuning in so far. What's up, Lloyd? First time ever on time to the live stream. Congratulations. Hope you enjoyed the show today. Thanks everyone that's already chatting, already in the comments section. We'll be doing a call in probably tomorrow, Wizard Death, just so you know. But yeah, big shout out to our patron community. You guys know we'd like to start and end our live streams with a big fat shout out to the patrons. Thank you so much to the patrons for supporting the show and making what Zach and I do possible. Really, really appreciate the support, guys. Again, we would not be able to do the show without our comrades and Vanguardians supporting our work over on Patreon. And that link is in the description. If you'd like your name to be on our shout out screen, then you can hit up that link in the description, support the show. So yeah, really appreciate that, guys. As I said, we like to start and end all of our live streams with a big shout out. And thank you, AV, first super chat of the live stream. Thank you so much, AV, for the $5. I was just rewatching your book club episodes the other day. You know, that's a nostalgic super chat. I really enjoyed doing those, Zach. Maybe we should do another book club one of these days.
Yeah, I was about to make a joke that AV is the only one, but Guy also had a lot of fun doing those. I remember like we really pushed hard to get those off the ground. But yeah, maybe we will do another one of those sometime soon. Maybe if we'll do it for the patrons, maybe we'll put them out for everybody. We'll see what's up. But yeah, I loved doing those. Did some great books. If anybody's curious, did Matt Taibbi's book Hate Inc. Did Slaughterhouse 5. Had a very eclectic potluck.
Chris Hedges, Wages of Rebellion.
We did, and we did Cornell West with a friend of the show, Kamali Rose, as well. So yeah, we were fucking on that for a while. People who call us the TMZ guard, jeez. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, we might get back into that. You know, it's not when we release one of them just as a solo clip, it never does very well. You know, it's not very algorithmic friendly content. But it'd be fun to just do it as like the last 30 minutes of our live stream sometime. You know what I'm saying? That could be a good way to bring back the book club, maybe just for AV in specific. But yeah, thanks so much for the kind comment, AV. Really appreciate that. Thank you also, Kelly, for the $4.99. Give me 50 UFO committees over another January 6th committee, please. I beg you, LOL. That's hilarious, Kelly. Yeah, obviously, you know, there's some important information being covered by the January 6th committee, but it is kind of like the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial for liberals. You know what I'm saying? like there's so much bigger things happening in the country, so much more important stuff. And then you have this like subsect of the population that's just fucking obsessed with this shit.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's hard for me to, I'm kind of in the same camp with you, Kelly. It's hard for me to get like outraged or concerned or even like invest any of my attention into the January 6th committee. Like, okay, did people do some things that were probably wrong or against the law? Like, yes, just like everybody that's still in office in our fucking government, right? Like they all do corrupt shit and they massively selectively decide which ones they want to make a big showcase out of, which is obviously the theater that everybody's frustrated with. So 100%, I would love to have a committee on all kinds of shit. Let's have a committee on the JFK assassination. Finally, why are we still having that be suppressed? Why can't we put some pressure on Joe Biden to release that shit? Why can't we actually have now that we're out of Afghanistan, let's actually reevaluate our past. Let's do an investigation 21 years later into the events on 9/11, right? Like those are the kind of committees that I think you would get way more support from the American people, right? You put a guy like Bernie Sanders and a guy like Rand Paul in charge of that committee and said, find what you can find out. I think people would be interested in that. But yeah, not so much the January 6th shit being trotted out again and again and again and again.
Yeah, no, I mean, if like, don't get me wrong, I think Donald Trump is a treasonous bastard. I think he deserves to be in prison for trying to circumvent the will of the people and, not accept the results of a democratic election. But that being said, I don't think he's going to end up getting charged through these hearings. I don't think, anyone in power necessarily is really going to go down as a result of these hearings. It seems like, all these schlubby militiamen that actually stormed the Capitol, seems like some of them might get indicted. But weren't they kind of just being used and tricked by the people that were in power, Donald Trump and his cronies. Those are the ones that really bear the responsibility as far as I'm concerned. So, if they ended up going down as a result of this, then that's great. I just don't think they are, because, current presidents are always so chicken shit as far as prosecuting the one before them.
Yeah, because look, I mean, it would start a chain reaction that Gavin and I would be wholeheartedly in favor of, right? Like if Donald Trump were to go down, which he won't, I don't want to give anybody any false hope. There's not going to be an indictment of Donald Trump. Absolutely not. But if they did, it would start a chain reaction. Like, let's say Ron DeSantis gets in the White House in 2024, right? Well, now he can retroactively say, well, what was the shady shit that Joe Biden was up to? Or Obama's going to be around for a long time. What was Obama up to, right? A lot of shady shit, a lot of shit that should end him up in prison, right? Obviously, same with Joe Biden, right? Every U.S. president can go to prison, as far as I'm concerned, so... it would kind of start a chain reaction that the aristocracy doesn't want to deal with the political class. They do not want to ever prosecute each other in a way that'll lead to their own prosecution for something different, just when the sways of power or the balance of power swings.
Absolutely. And thank you also for the $2. DV. Jane had a couple of great points back in 2015. Yeah, I used to be a big fan of TYT back in the day before they, took all that corporate cash and basically destroyed their own show. It got so much more watered down after that, so much less personality and energy on it, just complete self-immolation as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, before we get too sidetracked, did want to get into today's news. Do you want to start actually, Zach, with this Jimmy Dore on Fox News clip?
Yeah, we can. And I think, that super chat might have actually been in reference to the clip that's going around of Cenk praising Glenn Greenwald. So anyway, yeah, we saw that. But anyway, yeah, we can go ahead and plow into Jimmy Dore on Tucker Carlson, because we threw a lot of shade Jimmy's way yesterday for our disagreements with him, which I 100% stand by. But I think people are going to be shocked at, I think, how much agreement we have with some of the points that Jimmy's making on this one. And we can talk about the benefits of making these points to Tucker Carlson and potentially any drawbacks as well. But yeah, super excited to play this clip.
Yeah, let's react to this Jimmy Dore on Tucker Carlson. And of course, this is extra relevant because the story we're about to cover after this one is Cenk Uygur calling the likes of Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald, and Briahna Joy Gray fake lefties for going on Tucker's platform in the first place. So let's see, to what use Jimmy made of this platform. Let's see what kind of message he brought to Tucker's audience and to the Fox News audience in general. This is, the biggest show on cable news. So obviously it's important what you say on this show. So let's take a listen.
A list. Now, are you keeping a list of all the things Putin is doing? Now, are you keeping a list of all the things Putin is doing?
Might have to turn it up a little bit, guys. Sorry about that.
Russia's very... Now, are you keeping a list of all the things Putin is doing? Russia's very powerful. They control a lot of things. They overthrew our government. They committed a coup on America. They control the gas prices, and Russia's responsible for our inflation. And let me just tell you, last time I checked, Russia couldn't get their good vodka into Trader Joe's. So I don't think they're really controlling everything like they say they are, okay? So the Democrats right now are in power. They have complete control of government. And like all politicians, they don't want to take the blame for anything. They want you to blame everybody and everything or anybody and anything for the pain that you're feeling right now, except blame them, the people with the power right now. And so that's why everything comes back to Putin, because Putin is a proxy for their Trump hate, right? And you said Larry Summers blamed January 6th on inflation, which is an old Clinton advisor. So what they don't want us to realize is that we have a unipolar government, right? So if you vote for Joe Biden, you're voting for Goldman Sachs. If you Mitch McConnell, the same thing. You're voting for our oligarchy, and they don't want you to know that. And as soon as people wake up that we've been being screwed by the same billionaires that control Joe Biden, that control the Republican Party, that's what scares them. They don't want us to. They don't want me on your show talking to your audience, telling them that people on the left, we smell a rat. And we know that Joe Biden is completely controlled by the oligarchy and the corporations. And right now, the American people are paying the price. What are we paying the price for? Not for Putin's inflation, not for Putin's gas hike. This is Joe Biden's invasion. This is NATO's invasion. This is Joe Biden's policies. These are Joe Biden's policies that are wrecking the dollar, that are propping up the ruble to it's stronger than it's ever been, and they're blaming a foreign country. Imagine if Trump did that. They'd be making jokes about it every night on the nightly news. Of course they're not. I mean, the nightly talk shows. But of course they're not. They're all coddling. You saw Jimmy Kimmel have to coddle that old man, the guy who probably got stuck in a couch before he left that place. This is who's, and you know Joe Biden's not making the decisions. We all know that he's mentally impaired, and we all know that Kamala Harris isn't making those decisions because she also can't speak in clear sentences. So who is really running the country? Well, whoever runs the Democratic Party, which is a handful of billionaires, those are the ones. So if you're paying a higher price, they did a controlled demolition of our economy with the COVID lockdowns, and nobody wants to take responsibility for that. COVID lockdowns, which Johns Hopkins University proved saved 0 lives. They didn't make any impact on the death rate whatsoever, right? So that they don't want to take responsibility for that. They want you to blame your neighbor. They won't want you to be angry at the oligarchs or Fauci or Big Pharma or the media that controls you, that makes you think that essential medicines are poison. They want you to blame your neighbor. It's everybody is a Trumper or they're not. It's you're with us or against us. And that's the only message they have left. And then they have censorship left because they have failed, Tucker. Why do you think it is that Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer are the leaders in the House and Nancy in the Senate, and Nancy is the leader because they're not leaders. Those people have negative charisma. I wouldn't ask Chuck Schumer directions to the freeway. Why are they the leaders? Because they're the ones who take the most money from the billionaire class that actually runs this country. They take the money from them and they disperse it to the other members of Congress, so they vote for them as leader, not because they're leaders, but because they're the most corrupt.
Man, is that true? Great, Jimmy Dore. Great to see you tonight. Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, as you guys know, Zach and I have not been quiet about our criticisms of Jimmy Dore. And obviously I didn't agree with every single thing that he said in that clip. But that being said, I still think, this is why Jimmy Dore is popular. That was a great distillation of his kind of populist rage, calling out the elites for the excuses, frankly, they're making for their incompetence, for their malfeasance, and for their continued subjection of the American people. So what do you think of that, Zach?
Yeah. So for the first, how long was this clip? I think it was 3.5 minutes. For the first 2.5 minutes, I think Jimmy is flawless in this thing, right? And I think he's making 100% clear points. He's talking about how Biden has blamed every single one of his problems on Putin, how he's the one that's steered our policy in this direction, that he's made it more difficult on the American people with his sanctions and his policy at every step of the way. He's happy to send billions and billions of dollars and weapons over to Ukraine, but he's not going to give a cent to help the American people struggle through this, and just makes appeals for their patriotism and all of that kind of thing, right? So I think it's a slam dunk. As far as the messaging in that first couple of minutes goes, I would point out that, of course, every single Republican and 4 Democrats, so every single person in the Republican Party and a handful of Democrats voted against the measure to combat that very inflation that the Biden administration proposed. Not something that I think you would see Tucker harp about unless Jimmy brought it up. But I think that's also the argument to get somebody like Jimmy on a show like this, to make that argument to a person like Tucker Carlson in a way that he basically has to agree with it because it's 100% true. But steering him away from I guess I don't know, it's a mixed bag, right? But overall, I thought he knocked it out of the park until he kind of implied that it was the Democrats that sacrificed our economy during the COVID lockdowns, when all the lockdowns happened under Trump, which is something we've talked about. But I don't know. What was your reaction to all that, Gavin?
Did he imply that? I thought he just kind of said that, that was the result of the unipolar government or whatever.
Oh, I mean, that's interesting. When he all of the they did this, they did that, they did this was mostly, I thought, directed at the Democrats. And then, he said they did a controlled demolition of our entire economy.
Well, I think he was talking about the 2-party establishment for the most part. That was the whole point of the clip.
And right now, the American people are paying the price. What are we paying the price for? This is Joe Biden's policies. These are Joe Biden's policies that are wrecking the dollar, that are propping up the ruble to it's stronger than it's ever been, and they're blaming a foreign country. Imagine if Trump did that. They'd be making jokes about it every night on the nightly news. Of course, they're not. The nightly talk shows. But of course, they're not. They're all coddling. You saw Jimmy Kimmel have to coddle that. And Joe Biden's not making making the decisions. We decisions because she a handful of billionaires. Those are the ones. So if you're paying a higher price, they did a controlled demolition of our economy with the COVID lockdown.
So
And
straight from talking about the Biden, they did this. Who's controlling it? So that was just what I would say. Is that
Either way, I thought it was a good clip. I thought it was a good clip. And sometimes you do need to kind of tweak your language, your messaging if you're going on a place like Fox News or Tucker Carlson. And for the most part, I thought Jimmy did a good job there, again, expressing that kind of populist outrage at the Biden administration and the excuses that it's constantly making, refusing to keep any of the promises they had to the American people. And again, instead of just taking charge, showing an ounce of backbone in the face of these mounting national crises, whether it's inflation or the baby food shortage, all of these very serious issues, the rising price of gas, instead of taking any goddamn responsibility, they just tell you to go keep voting for more fucking Democrats, which is like, that's what we did. We elected 2 Democrats in Georgia despite all odds. Who the fuck thought that Georgia would get 2 senators sent to D.C.? And that's where we are. We have a fucking Democratic president. I think he has every right to call out these bullshit excuses. And again, I might disagree with Jimmy a little bit as far as some of the lockdown stuff. And, I think most developed countries did the same thing. It's not like America was particularly unique in the way that we, went about doing the lockdowns. But what I think he is 100% right about is the upward transfer of wealth that happened as a result of that entire period that we went through as a country, just basically bailing out all the corporations to the tune of billions and billions of taxpayer dollars. And, we've all just moved on from that. There's no commission hearing going on about all of the, theft of taxpayer money that went on during that time by the elites, by the oligarchy and the corporations. So I think, that's why he's probably bringing it up.
Oh yeah, I mean 100%. Look, and I agree with that 100%. I know people get so mad when you point this out, but it does a little bit. You're just like, oh, I'm gonna bemoan the oligarchy while I'm on a show where every check that's ever been cut to the host is from the oligarchy. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, Tucker is an elitist himself. He's rich as fuck. He literally is the, highest paid and biggest cable news host. But I still think there's a good argument to use that platform if you can. If you have access to a platform that big, I think you should use it to get your message out, which is what we're about to talk about more with Briahna Joy Gray here in a second. But yeah, for the most part, I think if you're going to go on Fox News and talk to Tucker Carlson, this is a pretty good way to do it.
Oh, 100%. And look, like I said at the beginning of this is the only way that Tucker Carlson's audience is going to be exposed to this kind of an argument, right? Because it's not like there's a parade of people on the right that are going to be making the same kind of arguments that Jimmy makes, right? And that's where I think that the benefit is, it's spelling out the entire thing. It does, it just, for me, it grinds my gears slightly, just because one of Jimmy's big beefs with everything is that you cannot trust anybody and you should never interact with anybody who's controlled by the oligarchs. And then, I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's totally fair. And like I said, we've been not quiet about our criticisms of Jimmy Dore, but I just think that you can hypocrisy burn all day. Got to evaluate something on its merits, which is what we're trying to do here. But I do agree with that as well. But yeah, I guess we can move on from that. Thank you, Nick, for the $4.99. Really appreciate that. This is why I support and defend Jimmy. I don't think Nomiki Konst is going to show up on Fox with a sassy new set of frames and start changing minds. Yeah, unfortunately, from what I've seen of Nomiki's appearances on Fox, they're for the most part pretty embarrassing. They don't necessarily paint the left in the best light. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely no fan of Nomiki's.
Yeah, that's a low bar to set for anybody, because she does kind of embody that like parody of the left that oftentimes Gavin and I try and our best to kind of get away from. So yeah, can't necessarily disagree with you there. And yeah, I think that Jimmy, did a better job presenting my version of leftist politics on Tucker Carlson show than somebody like Nomiki would have. Despite the disagreements or challenges I might have added.
Absolutely. Anyway, in similar related news, let's take a look at something we briefly covered yesterday, but we didn't really get into it properly because it was just all breaking. It was all coming out right before we went live. So now I think Zach and I have had some more time to digest this, think about it. And of course, so has Briahna Joy Gray, one of the targets of Cenk Uygur's latest rant, latest attack, calling her and others fake progressives. So in case you guys forgot, or haven't seen this yet, let's quickly listen to the clip from Cenk Uygur that has so many people up in arms.
The mainstream media is disgusting in how they shut out progressives. In terms of the right wing, no. Briahna Joy Gray, unfortunately, is one of the people that are in the fake left, and so this has become a whole niche part of the industry. So Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald, Briahna Joy Gray, and a couple of others in there that are. To be fair to Dave Rubin, he started this whole thing. The fake left saying, "Oh, well, it's just I'm a classical liberal, I'm a progressive, but it turns out the right wing's right about everything." Okay, so that's the shtick that they do, and they go on Tucker's show, and they dance for him, and so it's disgusting. They're not the real left, and here's how you can tell: they never disagree with Tucker.
All right. So, yeah, that was the
Mainstream media
clip
is
we reacted to yesterday. And again, there's a kernel of truth to what he's saying. There are certain lefties that basically refuse to criticize Tucker Carlson because they're afraid it's going to cost them an opportunity to access his platform. That is real. But what Zach and I agreed to yesterday is that, you can't really put Briahna Joy Gray in that category. She, first of all, I mean, Glenn Greenwald and Jimmy Dore literally do go on Tucker Carlson. Briahna Joy Gray doesn't even go on Tucker Carlson. And by the way, depending on the show, sometimes I think Glenn Greenwald and Jimmy Dore do a good job on Tucker Carlson, like we just showed you guys. Other times, maybe not so much. And I do wish they would push back on Tucker's bullshit more often when they are on there. But Briahna Joy Gray doesn't even go on there, at least not to my knowledge. I don't think she's really ever been on Tucker Carlson's show. So it's kind of weird that he's out here acting like, oh, well, she goes on there to dance for Tucker, which is a kind of gross language. First of all, if you're talking about like a black commentator going on a white, host space. Anyway, that aside, I just don't even really get the criticism because she hasn't even been on Tucker Carlson's show. And yes, she did this one radar kind of breaking down the appeal of Tucker Carlson, explaining why his kind of populist brand of anti-establishment politics sells in this day and age. So I think it's fair to acknowledge those facts. But in that same clip that a lot of people tried to, say gotcha on, she also disagreed with Tucker's main thesis about the great replacement theory and even compared him to Hitler, I think. So, I don't necessarily think it's fair to put her in that category. But before we get into her response, Zach, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, look, Cenk sets himself up with a fucking terrible argument here, right? I don't even think that it's necessarily fair at this point to say that somebody like Jimmy Dore is not a leftist. He's certainly not a leftist in the way that I identify as one, and he has taken some positions that I do not think are compatible with a left outlook that I have. But to say that he's not a leftist, I don't think has been evidence, right? And I think you see a clip like that where he's talking to Tucker Carlson and it's pretty clear where most of his political ideology lies. Now, our job is to critique people on the internet who are in the media space and what we disagree with. So we do that a lot. And the same with Glenn. Glenn never really is out here being like, I'm a socialist commentator, I'm a left-wing journalist. Like, never in his life, I don't think he's ever done that. Particularly not now. Whereas then if you immediately try and compare, and Briahna Joy Gray, we'll get to in a second, because she's even, I think, as ironclad of a leftist as you could probably be, even though we don't see eye to eye on everything, right? But then you have Dave Rubin, who is literally explicitly now advocating for all right-wing policies, like just constantly bending over to the right, just every single fucking talking point they have, he will regurgitate, right? He will clown himself in the most ridiculous ways, unserious ways. I don't even know how you could possibly take the man seriously with how many career pivots he's done, but for some reason people do. And then you use him as your baseline and you're trying to say that's what's happened to Briahna Joy Gray, somebody that you allude to the fact or you imply that she's been on Tucker Carlson's show. When I looked hard to see if there was any clips of her engaging with Tucker on Fox News, none. Not from when Bernie was running, nothing. I mean, she's likely been she's likely been on Fox News, but not with Tucker, right? So that's one thing that you should note. And yeah, she was massively critical of Tucker. We disagreed to the extent that she was critical of Tucker. We played a clip where she was like, I'm tired of not calling these people white supremacists. And then we were like, well, you didn't call him a white supremacist in this video. So we disagreed, right? But, her pushback was, it's her fucking program. She can make her whatever case she wants to. And, I think she was trying to reach Tucker's audience in a way that she felt like she wouldn't be able to if she labeled him a white supremacist. That was her fucking choice. That was a calculated decision to reach a specific audience. Gavin and I talked about how we might disagree with that, But that doesn't mean that, oh, you're not a lefty anymore. You get your fucking card taken from you. You know what? Like it's so ridiculous. It's so child like playground petty kind of bullshit. And it just kind of clowns Cenk Uygur, right? Because there is nobody that really would honestly and fairly assess that Briahna Joy Gray, former press secretary of Bernie Sanders, is now somehow like Tucker Carlson conservative simp. Like every single day she tweets about how we need to cancel student debt, that housing and it's too expensive. Like this is their entire bread and butter of her entire platform. She debunked all of the anti-CRT hysteria, right? I mean, she's been consistently on the right. She had a great debate about it. So anyway.
This is clearly just the result of Cenk only being familiar with her content via Twitter, seeing like posts dogpiling her without actually being familiar with the content she produces. Because again, if you watch Briahna Joy Gray's podcast, Bad Faith, or if you watch her segments on The Hill, you would know that she's one of the best representatives of the left, a very articulate, intelligent, and compelling speaker when it comes to a lot of these issues. So anyway, it looks like she responded here and said, when I disagree with someone I know and respect, I invite them on my podcast to discuss it with me. I'm grateful to Glenn Greenwald and Nathan Robinson for engaging maturely with the question of how to use, but not be exploited by conservative media. And she links to that interview, that debate. We actually reacted to that at the time. It was a really, really good conversation, I thought. And a really, as she says, a mature way for two people with serious disagreements to engage on the merits of their disagreement and hash out the beef, so to speak. I was a big fan of that. I thought it was a great segment at the time, and I'm really glad that she hosted that discussion. Anyway, she goes on here to say, I'm happy to chat with you on Bad Faith Pod anytime, Cenk. Glenn Greenwald knows the door is always open to him too. It's always a pleasure. So basically, Bri is keeping it classy here in the face of this attack. She said, if you have all these issues with me, if you want to make all these accusations and criticisms, then why don't you come on my show and talk about it? And I think he absolutely should. I would love to see Cenk go on Bad Faith and actually engage with Briahna with this pushback he has and hash out this beef. Clearly, she's open to it. Clearly, she's willing to do it. I don't see why not. It sounds like a great fucking idea.
Oh, that would be spectacular content. Would 10 out of 10 sign up and react to it on the Vanguard and blast it out, eat popcorn, watch it? It won't happen though, right? As I think the top comment sums up pretty well. He doesn't, Cenk, I don't think is actually interested in engaging and debating anybody about this. He's just interested in getting triggered on his own show and screaming into the abyss about it. And that way he can, maintain his delusions about the state of the left, right? I think that Briahna Joy Gray would fucking chew him up and spit him out in a debate over the state of progressivism in America. Are you fucking kidding me? And look, like I just said, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes I disagree with Briahna Joy Gray, and we'll talk about it on the show. But we have documented time after time after time of Cenk Uygur just fucking shitting the bed, right? Dropping the ball, whatever language you want to use as far as, progressive analysis is concerned. I mean, this guy has consistently flopped, right? And I'm not opposed to giving the guy credit when he, broken clock or whatever. But most of the time, it's just a swing and a miss from Cenk. And he keeps deluding himself into thinking that he's somehow the great Bambino anyway, right? Like he hasn't ever hit a fucking home run in his life, or at least not in the past 5 years, it doesn't feel like, right? When was the last time you saw a massive homer from Cenk Uygur, right? Long time. But and it'll all just start to crumble for him if he actually participates in these debates with people who will calmly and systematically dismantle any kind of argument or talking points that he can present to him. I mean, for fuck's sake, Hassan Piker can brutalize Cenk in a debate, and that's his fucking nephew. And he, you know what I mean? Like they were debating owners one time. I watched them, and they're just like sitting there, and Cenk is like, "Oh yeah, you definitely need owners. They bring a lot of," and Hassan's like, "What the fuck are you talking about? The people who go to work every day and do all of the actual working, you think create less value or an equitable amount of value to the guys that just link their bank account and say fucking have at it? Like, this is ridiculous." Anyway,
Also, again, and to whatever extent we engage in this, I apologize because it's really not productive to the discourse. But this whole thing of just labeling everyone you disagree with a right winger right off the bat, it really is tiring, and it's exactly what Cenk is doing. It's like engage them on the actual specifics of your disagreements. Go to bat over your disagreements. But every time you see something that you don't like, or someone's like getting more fucking views than you, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're just a right wing shill. Obviously, Briahna is making a lot of really good points. Again, if you actually listen to her content, she's a very intelligent person that's making like 99.9% of the time making straight up based left wing talking points, arguments, and perspectives. I just think it's absolutely ridiculous and such a parody of the kind of clownish leftism that Cenk and Anna embody, to immediately go to calling her a right winger because, again, she explained the anti-establishment appeal of Tucker Carlson in the populist age that we're living in. And again, is Tucker Carlson a bullshitter? Yes, absolutely. He's 100% a bullshitter. So is Donald Trump. But that doesn't mean we can't accurately analyze why Trump was so successful. The reason why he was so successful is because he tapped into this kind of populist rage that the country felt. And, he turned out to be a charlatan, much like Tucker Carlson. But you can still explain the appeal. You can still say, well, it's because he's talking about these specific issues that he's becoming popular. With Trump, a lot of it had to do with the outsourcing. Trump talked about how Bill Clinton shipped away all these jobs. He was going to bring them back. That's what he said. So yeah, it's okay to point that out. Maybe some of his populist appeal had something to do with the policies he talks about. In the same way, Tucker, despite how, full of shit he often is, he does channel a similar kind of anti-establishment populist rage, and not just at the, mainstream of the Democratic Party, but often at the mainstream of the Republican Party as well. So again, I, fully disagree with Tucker. Perhaps Zach and I are even more full-throated in our takedowns of Tucker than Briahna is. But I think we would both agree with that.
Yeah, 100%. And look, to your point about it being unproductive to call everybody that you disagree with a right winger, I definitely understand and empathize with that frustration. But on the other hand, I do think that it's important to say, like, yo, this is a right-wing talking point that is being adopted by members of the left. And a good example of that, I feel like that we've both done a pretty good job of navigating, is like this rise in like anti-trans hysteria. And I will die on the fucking hill. I will burn this channel to the fucking ground, and Gavin will with me. Like, we will never like abandon the like trans community for views and clicks, right? Because to me, you are not embracing a left-wing value set unless you are fighting for the rights and inclusivity and justice for all people, right? So that's like a hill that I will die on. So you will often hear me refer to right-wing bullshit, even if it's coming from a person that I do think is, nominally left-wing in a lot of ways, right? And let's use somebody that's even a little bit more inflammatory, right? Like Jackson Hinkle. Like, of course, Jackson Hinkle, he will make left-wing points about specific things. Guy wants Medicare for all. Guy wants, free college and shit, right? I imagine that those kinds of things are not the kind of commentary you're going to get from your majority of your right-wing commentators, right? However, do I think it's fucking disgusting when he tries to tweet out people, images of people at Pride and like drag them for expressing themselves in like the one fucking parade a year that's what it's designed for, right?
And imply that they're groomers, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That shit is disgusting, and it's right-wing talking points, and I will never fucking be quiet about that. So, yeah, is it, but I do think it's a problem, and we had this yesterday where we said, what, sometimes I think Glenn is more sympathetic to, right-wing talking points than Gavin and I are, and we got a, really polite super chat saying like, hey, would you guys be willing to list some of those grievances that you feel are, right-wing sympathies? And we were like, of course. We use right-wing as a catch-all phrase for things that I think are easily described as, right-wing sympathies, i.e. when people say, oh, Ron DeSantis and the right-wing populists are more concerned about free speech than the left. Red flag, right? And I will call that shit right-wing bullshit immediately. Or like we just talked about the, the anti-trans legislation, right? That's going on, and on all of these kinds of things. The don't say gay bills, all these kinds of deals. I think those are two good examples. Right. We brought up libs of TikTok.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. But I'm just saying that not necessarily what we do, but just in general, that can lead to the slippery slope of someone like Briahna being called a right winger, when obviously that's just patently bullshit. And even if someone is, 90% left wing or has 90% left wing views, and then 10% is like, dabbling in right wing talking points or pandering to the right wing, I still think that can be called out and engaged with on an issue by issue basis, rather than just kind of using the blanket term to try to discredit their entire ideology or their entire commentary as a whole. You know what I'm saying? Because even if it's true, I just think it kind of comes off as intellectual laziness and just a good way to like swat away an argument you disagree with, rather than just taking it head on and giving the left wing pushback.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. And yeah, and people who are listening, if you guys feel that that's something that we've done, feel free to chat us about it, because it is something that we're conscious of, right? And we want to do better at relating to, because yeah, I do think that sometimes it's just Gavin and I know exactly how we feel about it. I know how Gavin feels about something easy, so I'll just kind of like brush away shorthand what I'm talking about, and he'll be like, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about, like that kind of bullshit. And then, it's not as specific is what I mean. So I'll try and take the time to always specifically label the ideas that I'm talking about. That's why I wanted to take the time to say, I do think that Jimmy Dore is still, not, on the left wing, just not with my like prescription of the left wing. Same as how like my sister identifies as like, a lefty, right? But I don't agree with everything that my sister agrees with. I agree she's a good person, right? She wants what's good, but we have very different, but I would still say she's a lefty, right? Just as I would say that other people who, you fall on the more neo-lib side, okay, well, you're still a lefty, but not my lefty. You fall more on the conservative side, you're still a lefty, but not my lefty. I guess is the more nuanced, more liberal way of analyzing it.
Right. And I try as best I can. I'm sure I've, fucked up, but I try as my hardest to, even if I disagree with someone really hardcore, I try not to say, oh, well, you're a fake leftist, right? Like even someone like Vosh, whose positions on foreign policy, for example, I frankly don't find to be left wing. And in the same way, Jimmy, he has some positions that I don't find to be left wing. Neither of those guys am I just going to say, you're a fake leftist, you're not a legitimate leftist. No, if you consider yourself someone on the left and you align yourself for the most part with left policies, then I'll consider you a leftist and debate you on the merits of the issues, rather than just trying to swat away all of your points with some blanket label. Anyway, that's how I feel. But yeah, that's I
think it's important to clarify that, right? Because that is the new thing, right? And while we talk a lot about the media shifts, right, and the wind blowing in a right-wing direction, and how a lot of people are going to start, positioning their sails to kind of catch that boost, right? That's just a reality that happened. You saw Tim Pool when the wind was blowing to the left. He was willing to pivot his sails. So this goes both ways, guys. I'm not just saying that this is something that left-wing commentators, obviously the right wing does this too. Tim Pool is a great example of it, I think, because now he's back to being more right-wing with the sails pivoting again, right? But that's just what people do on the internet to stay relevant, right? And when they don't, you end up with a channel like TJ Kirk's The Amazing Atheist, which used to be a 1 million sub channel that was extremely relevant. And now, he's giving the same straight fucking TJ analysis, but the time and the relevance and the circumstances on YouTube are made such that he is like, getting content that's like obviously still more relevant probably than the Vanguard, but nowhere near the impact that he was getting, 5-6 years ago or before then.
Yeah. Speaking of, I still really want to talk to TJ Kirk on the Vanguard. I'm going to have to hit him up again and keep badgering his ass. Be like, come on the fucking Vanguard, bro.
Oh,
anyway.
I wasn't talking to you. Actually, I admire him for doing that.
Oh, me too. That's why I'm saying I want to chat. I really want to chat with the guy. I've been a long time fan of The Amazing Atheist, actually. Anyway, finally, let's move on to what Briahna Joy Gray actually responded with on her radar this morning. She, of course, is now one of the co-hosts of The Hills Rising. And this morning, she crafted her entire radar, her entire monologue speech around this whole issue, kind of responding to the smear by Cenk Uygur. So let's take a listen here. It's called Facts Don't Care About Your Party Identification. So let's take a listen here and see if we agree with her analysis of the situation.
Briahna, what's on your radar?
Well, Robbie, that meme, the worst person you know, just made a great point. Well, yesterday, Republican Iraq war hawk Bill Kristol made an observation that was so not terrible that it actually got co-signed by New York Congresswoman AOC. Not to sound like AOC or something, he tweeted, tagging AOC somewhat thirstily in the tweet. But the degree to which the Republican Party has become a party of performative populism layered over unabashed oligarchy is pretty striking. Now, he was specifically referring to the fact that the Republican governor of Montana, Greg Gianforte, has been out of the country while the state endures flooding so extensive that the acting governor signed an executive order declaring a statewide disaster. But Crystal could have been referring to any number of things. Billionaires like Rick Caruso and Michael Bloomberg buying elections, the influence of big moneyed interests on elections post-Citizens United, billionaires like Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and Jeffrey Bezos controlling the media, for instance. After all, since the corporate bailouts of the 2008 recession and the Occupy movement that sprung from it, American left populists have been ringing the alarm bell on the fact that democracy is dead. The thing is, though, it's not just the Republican Party that's overtaken by oligarchs. It's our entire two-party system. Now, it doesn't always feel like both parties are equally corrupted. Democrats, on the whole, are more subtle about their attacks on the social safety net, and they tend to use their superficial support for historically marginalized groups as a shield against critique. Hey, they say, at least we're nicer to gays and black folks than the Republicans are. On the other hand, some Republican electeds have been smart enough to pick up on growing frustration among the American public for establishment politics, and they've been making gestures toward embracing a sort of working class politics, even if it's mostly rhetoric with very little follow-through. We love working people, they say, as they come up with excuse after excuse not to raise the minimum wage while rejecting a windfall profit tax on corporations exploiting the oil crisis to make profit. Now, with Democrats doubling down on their courtship of suburban educated elites and relying on a plan to scare minorities into voting blue no matter who, Republicans don't need to do that much to seem like the better alternative to millions of voters who previously identified as Democrats or independents. After all, it seems obvious to most folks not named Joe Biden that the system is broken, and no one likes to be gaslit. We know the system is broken because a full-time minimum wage salary can't get a worker a one-bedroom rental in 93% of counties nationwide. And two bedrooms are completely off the table. And since the average minimum wage worker is a 35-year-old white woman and 28% of minimum wage workers have children, low wages represent a real threat to the American family. We know the system is broken because in 2020, the CEO earned 351 times more than the typical worker. In 1965, it was just 15 to 1. CEO pay has grown at 940%, while worker pay has only risen 12% during that time. We know the system is broken because in 1980, the average cost of a four-year college degree was a little over $10,000. It's 3 times that now. And adjusting for inflation doesn't solve the problem. Average college tuition and fees have increased by 1,200% since 1980. Inflation's just up 236%. We know the system is broken because a Princeton study proved way back in 2014 that America is not a democracy at all. It's an oligarchy. And why do I say that? What does that mean? Well, what the people want has an almost zero effect on what our democratically elected officials actually do. Per the study, a proposed policy change with low support among economically elite Americans is adopted only about 18% of the time, while a proposed change with high support among elite Americans is adopted about 45% of the time. In other words, when rich people want something, they get it. When poor or working class people want something, they're SOL. But enough with the doom and gloom. I don't have to belabor the bleak statistics. You're living them. Maybe you're a 40-year-old millennial who's never owned a home. Only 43% of us are homeowners after all, compared to nearly 80% of baby boomers. Or maybe you're a senior on a fixed income concerned about Biden's plan to hike Medicare premiums right before midterms. The point is that Crystal is onto something. The Republican Party is performative populism covering for unabashed oligarchy. What both he and AOC fail to say, though, is that it's not just Republicans. It is crucial that people who understand that establishment politics are broken not pull punches when it comes to holding one side or the other accountable. It might be Lindsey Graham trying to cut Social Security and Medicare this week, but as David Sirota pointed out in The Lever, a dozen years ago, Barack Obama and Vice President Biden held a ceremony at the White House to announce a commission to try to slash Social Security and Medicare, but for a sustained campaign led by Bernie Sanders, which included a threat to primary Barack Obama, Democrats might have succeeded. Too often, efforts to make life harder for working people are bipartisan efforts, and partisan sniping allows establishment politicians to pass off blame like a hot potato, while no one is ever held accountable. Is Biden doing enough to address inflation? No. But are Republicans offering a viable solution? Also no. Moreover, those of us in the media who are willing to point this out are often attacked by establishment punditry, accused of being in the tank for the other side, even as our criticisms are bipartisan. Wanting to hold Biden accountable to his campaign promises might get you called the Candace Owens of the left, at least if you're Black. Explaining why Tucker Carlson is appealing
And
to...
by the way, the annoying thing too about Cenk's whole argument is that, they are critical of mainstream corporate Democrats on the Young Turks quite a lot. So a lot of the arguments that Cenk, makes about Briahna could be made of Cenk by someone who's more of a corporate Democrat, saying like, why do you spend the entirety of your show trying to tear down the Democratic Party? Why are you always, feeding into right-wing talking points by calling out Joe Biden and the incompetence and malfeasance of the corporate Democrats? And obviously Cenk would respond, well, no, I'm criticizing them from the left. I'm making these points not because I'm a right winger, but because I'm actually to the left of the Democratic Party. And for the most part, I think the same criticisms Briahna makes of the Democratic Party, she would say the same thing. So in reality, that I think that's what's kind of frustrating about Cenk's criticism in the first place.
Well, yeah, look, I mean, I think you can genuinely criticize somebody for, having right-wing positions if they're a supposed progressives, right? But you need to give examples, and that's the problem with a guy like Cenk Uygur. So he doesn't give a single fucking example. He just attacks her for something that she didn't do, which, as you point, he said that she dances for fucking Tucker Carlson, or implied that she did, which again was pretty fucking disgusting and low. One, given the fact that there's the entire history of America, and then also the fact that she's never fucking been on Tucker Carlson's show, and two, and three, the fact that he doesn't actually engage with a single argument that she's made, and four, when you watch this, there's no way to walk away from it thinking that she has any sympathy at all for the Republican Party. So I think on all of those things combined just make this extremely embarrassing and pathetic for Cenk Uygur, but he does that time and time again.
So many viewers recently caused the co-founder of a popular left media site to accuse me of not being a leftist at all yesterday.
Mainstream media is disgusting in how they shut out progressives. In terms of the right wing, no. Briahna Joy Gray, unfortunately, is one of the people that are in the fake left. And so this has become a whole niche part of the industry. So Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald, Briahna Joy Gray, and a couple of others in there.
Oh, well, here's the thing. I don't care what you call me. A leftist, a fake leftist, a progressive, left populist, an independent, a socialist. I've used most of those labels at some point or another. What's important is less how you define folks than that we all collectively keep our eye on the following. Where do elected officials get their money? Who's paying them? Are media figures merely critics, or are they offering affirmative solutions to the real problems Americans across the political spectrum have identified? Are excuses like, how do you pay for it, leveraged evenly, or only when it comes to helping out American workers? Not when it comes to bailing out banks or funding regime change wars. Do all the reasons floated for why a middle-class life is inaccessible today make sense in light of the fact that just 50 years ago, our country was structured differently? Taxes on the rich were higher, social spending was higher, unionization was higher, and the middle class was living easier? Could it be that the people telling you things can't get better are self-serving, regardless of whether there is an R or a D behind their names? It is imperative that we keep talking to each other, that we not go into our respective silos, and that we treat everyone who not treat everyone who disagrees with us as a mortal enemy, as some of my colleagues in left media might recommend. When we do that, we stop being a community. We stop being an American people. We've already lost our democracy, according to the fellows at Princeton. If we completely lose our sense of belonging to an American community that can communicate with each other, that strives to be better together, what's left? This isn't a left-right conflict we're in, it's a top-down one. More and more people are realizing this, and that's something to be hopeful about. The trick now is to not let bad faith actors exploit this sincere desire for working class politics and use it to deliver more of the same. So I did this because I felt as though...
You're a fake leftist. You're going to have to vacate that chair for someone else.
I know. But these kind of purity tests, they get trotted out as I've observed them. every time there is someone who is even making an attempt to understand the other side, to dialogue with the other side, and to come with solutions, and to be willing to be critical of one's own party.
Yeah.
That's what sets people off. That's what sets the Soledad O'Briens of the world off. Not anything substantively I've said, because they never talk about anything specific. It's the idea that by even being in dialogue with other people, you are somehow, by definition, throwing your own community and interests under the bus.
Yeah, our Rising Fridays co-host Ryan Grimm had a great article in The Intercept this week.
I was just going to add that I think if anything, you can criticize somebody for being all chummy with a real piece of shit and like selectively tackling their arguments. But one of the things that I think unanimously people celebrate Briahna Joy Gray for is her ability to be both completely professional, but also pretty insistent that you answer tough questions that she's going to ask you. I mean, this is not a woman who's a timid interviewer by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, she's ruthlessly good at pinning people down to fucking answer something tough, including Congress people, right? So like Ro Khanna, for example, she just had a great exchange with, people constantly praise her for her ability to challenge the people that she's interviewing, which is just another reason why, she's engaging with the right. That must be a bad thing. It's like, well, no. And also people like Cenk Uygur have constantly engaged with the right throughout their entire career, right? Debating, doing all those kinds of things as well. So again, it just kind of adds to the whole like hollowness.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just finish out this clip before we finish our commentary on this specific segment.
About the kind of struggle session mindset that prevails in some of these progressive activist circles. That's like a caricature, of what someone on my side would say is going on, and then you really go, oh, there's a lot of that going on actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's the problem is that it's elite capture.
Yeah,
it's these people at these institutions. It's not what I think is a broader, authentic left movement. It's these, kids at Oberlin or whatever who are populating a lot of these left groups and these media institutions that have elite interests because they are elites and they are co-opting the priorities of the identity groups that they might technically belong to, but they don't have the same interests as those groups. So, affluent, Black people on TV or affluent LGBT people on TV focus the conversation toward things that aren't the immediate interest of working class people in all of those groups. And I talk about this with Pascal Robert actually on my podcast today, who he gets into the history of how movements have been co-opted in exactly that way, and how identity oftentimes collapses the real meaningful differences, class differences between the people who are advocating for these groups at the top and what's really going on down on the streets. Yeah,
the effect is pretty clear at this point that working class people feel a declining affinity for the Democratic Party. They're increasingly being captured by the Republican Party, which, from your perspective, should not happen given the relative positions of the parties. And it speaks to, I know we've talked about this a lot, but it just is the effect, right? That the many working class people feel that they don't trust the Democratic Party, or they've overreached on cultural issues, or they don't trust what their policies are for taking care of their families or whatever it is. And that's a huge problem for the Democratic Party, because then it's becoming increasingly reliant on the affluent white liberals.
And that's by choice.
Right.
That's by choice. They've chosen not to respect their base. They've chosen to write them off as stupid rubes who don't know better.
And none of us like the policies of affluent white liberals.
Nobody
does. It's the most uniting thing of all.
And they don't trust that if they were actually just to deliver, that they could actually best Republicans on some of these culture issues. And then meanwhile, the bar is so low that Republicans can get away with performatively signaling populist politics. And
they can get away with massively overreaching on their response to culture issues that some of their zanier, crazier people in their base want, because right now the Democratic Party is so screwed they can do whatever they want.
So I thought that was pretty accurate analysis for the most part. And I think it is very true that increasingly we see the Democratic Party pandering mostly to elite white liberals, upper class liberals, and elites. You know what I'm saying? I think that's a fair and accurate analysis. And I think it's proven by the fact that they had a candidate who was doing really well in their primary, someone who appealed to the youth, someone that, appealed especially to young Hispanic voters and young Black voters, obviously that being Bernie Sanders. And not once, but twice, they did everything in their power to shut him out of the primary and to get behind instead Joe Biden, who, of course, is, a tailor-made candidate for those kind of suburban white liberal voters who really just wanted more of the Obama era. So I think that's, the proof is in the pudding, right?
Yeah, look, and I think that all of there's just a massive historical parallel right now that I think has to be drawn. We talked, I guess like a year and a half ago, to Thomas Frank, and one of the things that he pointed out, and he points it out in his books, I highly recommend people read them. But he talks specifically about the McGovern Commission, right? And how after the in the 70s, post McGovern Commission, that there was a decoupling of the or in the early 70s of what had made up the working class and the civil rights movement politically, right? And that basically what happened was they decided that on the issue of the Vietnam War, they were going to divide the country, not on lines of class, but on academia. Right. So this is how the Democratic Party first kind of gets this idea that they don't need to deal with those, Jodes, the Jodes being Tom Frank's expression for the people from Grace, who are at the working class. Instead, just the people who are at universities, these affluent people who view themselves as enlightened. Right. This is how we get the birth of the liberal class. And that just sounds like this is exactly what's happening again. Right. Again, you've spat on the option of Bernie Sanders. Right. And instead, you're going in the complete opposite direction, which is to double down with the PMC class, abandon the working class. And of course, those voters are going to turn around and what are they going to do? They're going to elect Reagan, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I thought that was a pretty strong monologue from Briahna Joy Gray. And again, I don't agree with every single thing Briahna says. There's no one that I agree with 100% of the time. But I do think it's ridiculous to call her a fake leftist, as Cenk did. Really just dumb. And again, I'm hoping to see him actually engage with her and take up her invitation to have a discussion on the Bad Faith podcast, maybe hash out some of these areas of disagreement. I think, just as a viewer, regardless of my job as a commentator myself, I just want to see that happen. There needs to be more discussion, more kind of cross-pollination between the two sides of the left. I think it's fucking ridiculous that someone like Briahna Joy Gray and someone like Cenk Uygur, who are both huge Bernie people, now all of a sudden feel like, or at least Cenk feels like, they're so different that they can't have a fucking civil conversation. Come on, man! Let's make this happen. I want to see it. So that would be the end of my commentary as far as that goes. Have a couple super chats to address. Thank you so much, Nick, for the 199. What was that?
I just had some final thoughts on the clip that we were getting to. Sorry. No, I just think that you're 100% right. And I think that, we've talked about getting more debates scheduled on our channel as well, because there is no, we mentioned earlier in the show, for everybody from, Vosh to Jimmy, there's no point in calling them fake leftists. That just kind of puts you in the camp where you're like, I'm the only real leftist. Fuck everybody else. Gavin's a fake leftist. I'm not, whatever. Right. So I think that, building that bridge and isolating the fundamental disagreements that we have with one another, and hopefully changing people's position on those couple of issues is going to be the real next battle in the next chapter for the left-wing project in this country.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And yeah, we would actually like to engage in more debates too on this channel. So if there's anyone specific you guys would like to see us have a conversation with, let us know. Because again, we are trying to engage in more kind of debate stuff. I think it would be fun to hash out some of our opinions and disagreements with other content creators. Anyway, to get into a few super chats, thank you so much, Nick, for the 199. On the spectrum, Cenk belongs between Briahna Joy Gray and Dave Rubin. I'm guessing you're talking about the leftist spectrum, not the autism spectrum. No, I'm just kidding. But I guess, yeah, I'm sure he would fall somewhere in between.
Yeah, I mean, I think the argument being that Cenk is actually to the right or to the neoliberal center of somebody like Briahna Joy Gray, and I think that's 100% evidenced by his commentary and also his life decisions.
And let's not forget that Cenk was one of those guys during the 2020 primary acting like Elizabeth Warren was just as much of a progressive as Bernie Sanders, and saying, oh, don't worry, if Bernie doesn't make it, at least we have Elizabeth Warren to be the standard bearer of progressivism. Come on, bro. So yeah, Cenk is definitely, and that's the other thing about this whole debacle. It's so much projection involved. Cenk has no right to call anyone a fake leftist, as someone who is literally engaged in union busting or attempted union busting. Someone who literally took thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars from establishment corporate funding to, again, make his show more establishment friendly. That's just the facts of the situation. So definitely the pot calling the kettle black. Thank you though, Nick, for the 199. Thank you also, Christina, for the $4.99. What do you guys, or who do you guys think actually watches TYT now? Maybe the PMC. Yeah, I mean, definitely not as many people as used to watch TYT. That's for sure. Every once in a while I tune in. But like I said, ever since they took that money, it really seems like there's just so much less energy, less personality on the show. One of the reasons why TYT used to be such a popular show online is because, you know, it was this news show that had a professional looking set and desk and all that crap. They had graphics on screen, but they actually like would swear on show, and, you know, they would get into kind of weird, funny stories sometimes that were a little bit inappropriate. You know, they had more character to them. And also they were a little bit more anti-establishment back in the day as far as their talking points goes. It seems like ever since they took that money, they really watered down the quality and the personality of their own show and commentary. And it's just created a much more boring product at the end of the day. At least that's how I see it. Again, obviously there's still some areas of disagreement, or of agreement rather, with the folks at TYT. But for the most part, I just find it to be a very boring and watered down version of its former self.
Yeah, I mean, I never really spent a ton of time watching the glory days of TYT if they existed, but right now I have to imagine that it's going to be like a lot of like, I don't know. I have no idea who watches it. People who, you know, were like tangentially in favor of a lot of Bernie Sanders policy, and now that just they hit subscribe on YouTube, and now that's just, you know, how they get their news or whatever, just passive consumer content. But I don't know. I imagine that they probably just had a lot of people who formed a intense media diet around them during the Bernie Sanders era, and, you know, became like a sense of comfort for them to have it on. I don't know, all the kind of things that make people listen to whatever fucking commentary we normally do. Just, you know, a numbers game. They've got 5 million subs that they're blasting out to. They're going to get some people that are going to click and watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Christina, for the $4.99, and thank you also Hoodwink for the $5. I love her Ellie Mae of Beverly Hillbillies dress. Not familiar with that, although I did think Briahna looked great in the clip. As always, she has a great fashion sense.
Yeah, I'm aware of the Beverly Hillbillies, but would not be able to pinpoint what dress you're talking about. But thank you so much for the $5, and I imagine that was a compliment. So yeah, we both thought the dress looked good.
Yeah, that is a nice dress. Again, I don't know anything about the Beverly Hillbillies. Is that like a show or something, Zach?
Yeah, back in the like 50s, it was it was like a really, really popular black and white TV show. And then they made a movie out of it in the 90s, I believe. But yeah, you know, I get it. That's very like Southern traditional kind of you know, garb.
Yeah, it looks pretty good to me. No doubt about it. Yeah, shout out to you, Briahna, for dressing legit. But thanks so much, Hoodwink, for the $5. Really appreciate that one. And thank you, Christopher Dillon, for the $4.99. I'm sure you have addressed it before and I missed it, but could you specifically enumerate specific positions Jimmy Dore holds that are actually quote unquote right wing? Sure, Christopher, I'd love to. So, you know, there's a couple in specific that kind of jump to my mind as examples of Jimmy pandering to the right wing. I think that's a better word, honestly, is the way he panders to the right wing sometimes. One that Zach brought up earlier was the way that he and other people do this too, by the way. They'll kind of hold up a guy like Ron DeSantis and say like, oh, well, Ron DeSantis made this one statement about how authoritarian and censorious the Biden administration is. And let's play that and, you know, give him credit for it without actually mentioning any of the numerous ways that Ron DeSantis himself is a censorious authoritarian. So, you know, you don't see a lot of segments on his show attacking DeSantis for those ideas, despite the fact that he's, you know, probably the, you know, most significant rising politician in the country, a very important political figure, the governor of Florida. So you don't see a lot of videos where he specifically goes after the censorious authoritarian policies of a guy like Ron DeSantis, but then he'll give a guy like DeSantis credit when he calls out the Democrats. So, you know, I think there's an example of him kind of pandering to the right wing. Before you jump in, Zach, one other that immediately comes to mind is the fact that there's this, you know, very obvious and concerted effort on the right wing right now to gin up a panic, a moral panic over trans people specifically, but really the whole LGBT community, straight up gay people. You know, you see like 1980s style homophobic talking points that are practically mainstream now in the Republican Party once again. And instead of, you know, pushing back on those, from what I've seen, at least, Jimmy Dore actually, you know, kind of feeds into it a little bit. You know, he did this segment where he was basically giving Bill Maher credit for pushing back against trans extremism. That was the literal title of his video. And I thought all the points that Bill Maher made were really ignorant, to be honest. And all the ones that Jimmy made in the segment about Bill Maher, I also thought were really ignorant. So again, that's not to say he's a fake leftist. That's not to say he's a right winger necessarily. But I've just observed a few instances of him kind of going where the wind is blowing rather than pushing back on some of these obviously, concocted right wing moral panics and culture war issues. And then, of course, he'll turn around and say that it's the left that engages in the culture war too much. When in reality, it's the right wing, which is ginning up all of these moral panics and culture war issues so that they don't have to focus on any substantive policy that would actually help the working class American people.
Yeah, and just to add, you can give Ron DeSantis credit, I guess, or you could give Marjorie Taylor Greene credit in a vacuum. But what he also loves to do is turn around and say that everything that AOC and the rest of the squad or any Democrat does that doesn't directly result in action is performative, that it's all a sham, that they're controlled by the oligarchs. And these are people that are not taking massive amounts of corporate money, right? AOC is not taking massive amounts of corporate money, regardless of my opinions of her. She's not. She's getting lots and lots of small dollar grassroots donations that, I think maybe people are spending her too much money, but that's a completely different criticism. Ron DeSantis is literally raking it in hand and fist with corporate cash, right? All of the worst of the worst kind of businesses to fund somebody. Yeah, they're all in the coffers of Ron DeSantis. Funny how Jimmy never brings that up, right? Even though you can't get one breath out of his mouth before he tells you that a journalist like Ryan Grimm is funded by Pierre Omidyar, right? But he doesn't give a shit about the laundry list of people who are funding an actual sitting politician who is massively popular and poised to run for president again. So those kinds of things I think do matter because you might say, you can give somebody credit without agreeing with everything that they say. Fine, but that just goes directly against Jimmy's entire philosophy for how he presents information about the Democratic Party. And Gavin already brought up the fact that, for our taste, he's definitely leaned in way too much into the anti-trans stuff, which I have not been very happy with, frankly, seeing the rise of people who consider themselves leftists leaning into these kinds of archaic, just downright destructive talking points. And we can go back even further in the history of Jimmy Dore, right? I think that he's got mostly made a lot of pretty good content on things like Ukraine. But I also think that a lot of times he lets people come on his show and spout a bunch of absolutely insane shit. And I guess maybe that's not going to be best described as right wing. But that's another problematic, strange thing that he's doing where he'll just have people come on and their whole shtick is that they just straight up simp for Vladimir Putin and will make excuses for every single thing that he does and completely strip the fact that, yes, the United States is an aggressor in this situation. And yes, we are 100% at fault. And yes, what we should be doing is advocating diplomacy. But instead, I draw a line before somewhere with Vladimir Putin's on a denazification mission in Ukraine to liberate all of the people there. And I don't know. Those would be a few examples that immediately jump to mind.
Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. We don't have to spend 20 minutes talking about all of the, disagreements we have enumerated live on air many times before, but that's a, brief answer to your question. And thank you for asking it. We're more than happy to explain our positions on this stuff. But thank you also, Christina, for the $4.99. TYT relentlessly pushed Russiagate. That is very true, Christina. And, that was one of those instances in the period after taking all the corporate cash that I really started to get, sussed out by Cenk Uygur specifically, but TYT in general. Because, people say MSNBC lied a lot whenever they are talking about a commentator they don't like, but TYT literally did become MSNBC light for about a year or two when the Russiagate fervor was at its peak. You guys remember, if you were paying attention, Cenk Uygur doing segment after segment after segment, saying the walls are closing in, tick, 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 tick. It's only a matter of time before Bob Mueller, gets Trump and he's going down, guys. Again, ginning up his audience with this false hope that Trump was going to, get taken out and his collusion with Putin would be illuminated for the world to see. All of that, obviously did not happen. But much like Rachel Maddow, Cenk was able to reel in his viewers night after night. with this narrative, with this, again, false hope about what was going to happen. So that's absolutely accurate, Christina.
Yeah, and I think that's revealing as to who is still watching TYT, right? The people who, still are holding on to the whole like Vladimir Putin villain Russiagate type of analysis of the whole situation. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Christina, though. Really appreciate that. Thank you also, Kelly, for the $4.99. Right-wing populism compared to traditional Kansas, specifically populism, is apples and oranges. Yeah, I mean, obviously populism is one of those words that's kind of tough to pin down a specific definition for, because you can be a right-wing populist or you can be a left-wing populist. And even Zac and I, we consider ourselves to be left-wing populists, but that doesn't mean that every single time, 100% of the time, we're only going to align with the position that is most reflected in the populist polling. Sometimes there's an issue like defund the police, for example, that Zac and I are both staunch defenders of and advocates for as a policy. Is it, the most popular policy ever, at least as far as the phrase itself goes? Not necessarily, but we're not going to change our opinion based on that. That's how we feel. So again, we consider ourselves left-wing populists. There are certain issues where we might be a little bit out of line with the majority of the population. And I think that could be said too of a left-wing populist, like a guy like Sagar and Jetty, for example. He identifies as a right-wing populist, but he's not in favor of legal weed, which, obviously is a populist issue that is a bipartisan consensus at this point. So, it's definitely a little bit of a slippery kind of a label. But hey, that's maybe why it works so well.
Yeah, and look, I think that when we had our debate, and check it out if you guys missed it, this was one of our first real debates that we ever did together, but we debated right-wing versus left-wing populism. And, essentially the crux of our argument was that there's really no such thing as right-wing populism, because every single right-wing populist candidate is funded by the oligarchy, right? There are no corporate free politicians from the right-wing populist movement. And so that will kind of display to you that what right-wing populism is just basically culture war, right? Which is funny because the right wing loves to bemoan the culture war and talk about how much they hate it, but all they have is the culture war, because they're not going to do any bread and butter table issues. They're just going to raise an alarm on a bunch of shit like trans kids playing field hockey, and the fact that we have to actually deal with and grapple with our racist past in our classrooms, and tell people that it wasn't manifest destiny, it was actually a genocide of Native Americans that made room for their houses in fucking Utah and shit.
Right. And that's what's so annoying about people pretending that it's the left that only focuses on culture war issues and identity politics, when in reality, usually when the left is talking about culture war issues or identity politics, they're just responding to the insane bigotry of the right. Most lefties aren't just out here constantly talking about this shit. It's because the right wing has this very concerted effort, which we're seeing play out right now, to demonize the LGBT community, to fearmonger about drag queens, to spread these disgusting regressive talking points about gay people being groomers, to gin up these fake controversies about critical race theory, et cetera, et cetera. The list could go on for literally hours and hours of all the fake bullshit issues. Again, trans people in sports. Again, not that these are obviously these are things that are happening, but they act like they're so much bigger of an issue than they are. They focus on them so much to the extent of anything else that's important. But again, somehow it's the left that gets labeled as identity politics and culture warriors, when again, usually most of the time when we talk about this stuff, we're just responding to their insanity and their bigotry, because you can't just let it go unchecked, right? You have to respond when these kind of disgraceful and bigoted talking points are becoming mainstream.
Oh, 100%, right? And I mean, that's why I've said this has always been a bedrock of leftism, sticking up for the LGBTQ community, right? Sticking up for, minority groups whenever they're the ones that are being targeted, right? And the GOP always has a fucking moving target, right? It's whoever they think they can, right now, they've decided that it's smarter for them, Donald Trump was so fucking racist and openly vile towards the Hispanic community, right? Calling them rapists and fucking illegals and all kinds of shit, right? Now, the Republican Party has wised up a little bit, right? And they're like, okay, well, we can't use immigrants 100% to be our main talking point target, because a lot of people who are Hispanic, now are American citizens and they've raised families here and they've become a thriving part of their community. Shocker, right? Okay, but now we can't call them like fucking names and nastiness if we want them to vote for us. So they've pivoted and they're like, okay, what's an even more fringe, easier to target community now? And they've decided that they're going to go after the LGBTQ community, primarily the trans community, but all members of the LGBT community, calling them groomers, making them fearful of their employment if they're like a public school teacher. That's one of the most fucked up things that I can actually remember from my own life in school was I had a chemistry teacher, very obviously a lesbian woman, right? Had a friend that she lived with, and really awesome teacher, won all kinds of awards. Actually, Olathe North had where I went to high school, we had like a science club, and at Union Station, they won 50 grand like 3 years in a row. They stopped letting our school compete. Anyway, this lady was magnificent is what I'm trying to tell you. Great teacher, very committed. She can never talk about her long-term, like fucking 20-year partner at school at all. And the only reason you would like find out about it is if you like fucking graduated and followed her on Facebook or something. You know what I mean? Very weird that is still an element of our society, and that libs of TikTok, if you were to just defy that, could get 100,000 people to call you a groomer and then get you fired. So all of those kinds of things. That's a little bit of a hill, but
Right. And obviously there are some, there is a subsect of the left that is overly obsessed with identity politics at the expense of actual more serious like economic issues and stuff. The people that are obsessed with Latinx and the type. Like obviously there are social justice warriors. That is an annoying trend that is a real thing.
Parcheesi is racist.
Right. People that call everything racist and talk about cultural appropriation constantly, stuff like that. Yeah, it's fucking annoying. We get it. But simply defending, our gay comrades and our fellow citizens of this country that happen to be in the LGBT community, defending them from these disgusting, bigoted talking points about groomers and pedophilia and all these, antiquated, regressive slurs and stuff like that. That's not engaging in the culture war. Again, just to stick up for gay people and say, like, actually being gay does not make you a groomer. You can be a teacher and be a gay dude. That doesn't make you a fucking groomer. Again, that's just pushing back on what is obviously a concerted effort to gin up a moral panic over queer people, and that's unacceptable in my opinion. Something has to be pushed back upon for the sake of those very communities. They're an increased risk of hate crimes and all this stuff as a result of this rhetoric. So yeah, of course it's important to stick up on it, just like you would for anyone else. So again, I think that's common sense, but we're off on a little bit of a tangent here. Thank you so much, Red Robin, for the 179. Really appreciate that. Cenk and Trump more alike than Cenk would care to admit. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. They're both narcissists. They're both, guys that like to take control and be the have the center of attention, all that stuff. So yeah, you're not incorrect.
They're going to merge together to form one chump.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Red Robin, and thank you so much everyone for tuning in. Unless there's anything else you wanted to talk about, Zach, we can probably get out of here for today.
Oh no, man! I was actually about to open up this 3-hour video that I wanted you to react along with me. We're gonna react all the last 3 ContraPoints videos. We're gonna go painstakingly through them. I have timestamps at every 4-minute mark. No, I'm kidding. This was a great show today, and yeah, we can get out of here.
Yeah, thanks everyone for tuning into the show today. Like I said, had a great time chatting with you all, engaging with some comments in the super chat. Make sure to follow us on Callin as well. Zach and I are probably going to be going live on Callin tomorrow, so you're not going to want to miss that. And again, if you guys ever hear something you disagree with on the Vanguard, feel free to call into our show and hash out the disagreement. It seems like most people that call in are just like, they just want to be like, oh, we love your show and this is so cool to talk to you and stuff. But we're more than happy to engage with pushback, engage with people that want to argue with us. So again, if you heard something that you disagree with and feel the need to hash out the beef, feel free to call into our show. Again, it's on Call In. More than happy to talk about this stuff with you guys. More than happy to have our own minds change. So, feel free to do that. But yeah, thank you so much to the patron community as well. You guys know that we like to shout out our patrons at the beginning and end of all of our live streams because you guys make this show possible. So if you enjoy the content we create, feel free to hit up the link in the description. Throw us a couple bucks on the monthly. It really does help out. Again, we would not be able to do the show without you guys. So thank you so much for your support.
Yeah, 100% appreciate all of the people in the comment section as well. And appreciate everybody that watched today. Hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, and we'll see you all next time. Much love to you all.
And Ryan, by the way, we don't really have a set schedule. We like to do it towards the end of the week, so usually like a Friday or a Saturday. But if you subscribe to us on Callin, again, you just download the Callin app, subscribe to the Vanguard. It will notify you, or at least it should notify you when we go live. But Ryan, we probably will be going live on there tomorrow, so make sure to follow us on Callin so you don't miss that. Excited to chat with everyone as always. But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. We certainly enjoyed it. And have a great Thursday.
100%. Peace out, everybody.